Is my camera not working?
On land deals, there's an automatic 7-day postpone and closing, right?
I'll have to look at the
You have
new
to,
contract.
lateral, you have to get notification.
Yeah, no.
I think most of the contracts have a provision where as long as you give the notice, you can do unilateral, one party notifies the other.
Yeah, because that, Mike Nash asked me if everything was looking good, and when I went out there yesterday, he said it should be good, which don't make me feel good.
All right, well, you're live. Okay, so today we are going to go over contract to closing, navigating common issues and solutions. The key points we're going to talk about today is from the moment a contract is accepted until the closing day. That is the most critical time and most stressful time of any transaction. This is where deals fall apart and where great agents prove their worth. Your job during this phase shifts from a salesperson to a transaction manager and problem solver. The clients who close smoothly are the ones who refer you, review you, and come back to you. No two transactions are identical, but the problems that arise tend to follow predictable patterns, and that's what we'll cover today. Everything that we're going to discuss today is drawn from real-world situations, so take notes. If you have questions, let me know, and we'll think about how each scenario might apply to deals that you are working on soon. So we're going to talk about inspection issues, which is arguably the most common source of deal disruptions. Almost every home has something flagged on an inspection report, and the key is to know how to respond strategically. We're going to talk about financing and appraisals, which is money problems that surface mid-transaction, often more money than a buyer expects, or a pre-approval that's not guaranteed. However, underwriting is. We're going to talk about title and document issues, which is often invisible until the title search is done, which is what you are dealing with now, Tim. These can be slow to resolve, which is why early action is critical. We're going to talk about repair negotiations, which is separate from the inspection itself. Once the issues are identified, the negotiation over who fixes what and how can cause its own challenges. We're going to talk about closing delays. Even well-managed deals hit delays. Knowing how to handle them professionally keeps deals alive. And then we're going to talk about buyer and seller disputes, emotional and relational challenges that can escalate quickly if an agent doesn't step in with a calm, professional approach. All right, so here we go. The home inspection is often the first major hurdle after a contract is signed. Buyers who were excited about their new home suddenly receive a 40 to 80-page inspection report listing every imperfection, from major structural concerns to minor maintenance items. Without guidance from you, the buyer can panic and the seller can dig in. Your calm, informed leadership is what keeps deals alive. In almost every transaction, the inspection will reveal something. This is completely normal. The report that comes back clean is very rare. The inspection contingency gives your buyer a window, typically between 3 and 10 days, depending on what you've negotiated in your contract, to review the report and decide how to proceed. You have to know your contract timelines. As an agent, you are not a home inspector and should never offer your opinion on the severity of the defects. Your job is to help the client understand their options and facilitate the negotiations. If a buyer calls you crying after reading the inspection report and says they want to back out, what's the first thing you say to them?
Suck it up.
Find out what is the reason they would want to back out. What are the issues?
You get ready for you.
Is this supposed to be, I didn't get a link.
No, this is on YouTube itself.
Okay.
So if you go to our YouTube channel, you could follow, but it's going to echo back.
We have a YouTube channel?
We have a YouTube channel. It is at Southern Home Real Estate on YouTube. And so this is how we're going to do our meetings from now on, so that our meetings are automatically on there if somebody's not able to attend.
Okay.
And that way you can watch it live from home, or you can be here in person, or you can catch it on replay, whatever you need to do. So that way you're not going to miss the training, because I know everybody's busy and our main job is to sell real estate. And when we're sitting in the office, we're not doing that. So if you got appointments or whatever, that's fine. But anyway, back to the presentation. So what we want to say when that buyer calls upset, we want them to take a breath and let's look at the actual findings together before we make a decision. So we want to just go through that inspection line by line and talk about everything that the inspector came up with. The inspector's job is to find problems. Every house is going to have something. No inspection is going to come back clean unless it's a bad inspector. I mean, just to be quite honest. Even on new construction, inspectors are going to find something.
Especially when new construction, like doors not shutting good.
Exactly, because we're all human. A human built that house. There's going to be imperfections. Okay, so let's talk about the inspection in depth. Major structural defects. The roof, the foundation, the heat and air. These are big ticket items that can destabilize a deal. When a roof needs a full replacement or foundation shows cracks, the stakes are high for both sides. For the buyer, remind them that these items can be negotiated. A brand new foundation isn't required to close. A credit towards future repairs often is. For the seller, major defects that were unknown are typically not their fault. Frame the conversation around getting to closing, not assigning blame. You should order 2 to 3 licensed contractors to give estimates immediately when you're representing the seller. Have real numbers. Say $12,000 for a roof is far more productive than saying it just needs a roof. You could put a dollar value on it.
That cost comes out of their pocket, though, right?
Well, if it depends on how you negotiate it. If you're negotiating a repair allowance to the buyer, then yes, at closing, that's going to pull from the seller's proceeds. If you are negotiating that the repair is done ahead of closing, then that's going to be something the seller is going to need to pay for up front or negotiate with a contractor to get paid at closing. That can happen either way as well. Yes, ma'am.
Or could you do like a not so much as a concession, but a lower dollar amount offer?
Right. Yeah. You can negotiate off of the purchase price.
Mhm.
You can negotiate off of seller's contributions to closing. You can negotiate a repair allowance given at closing. All of that, yes, everything's negotiable. So it's whatever you can do to work out with that client to hold that deal together. That's our job from the time we put it under contract. We are a transaction coordinator, which means we want to hold that deal together all the way through to and through closing. So let's say a seller refuses all the repairs. This is very common. I have one going on right now where my buyer asked for a list of things to do and the seller kind of got upset about it and said, I'm doing nothing. It's as is.
Oh, yeah.
So first, yeah, you got one going too. First, you want to review the contract. If the buyer has a valid inspection contingency and the seller won't negotiate, the buyer does have the right to walk away and keep their earnest money. But you want to try a compromise. Even a small gesture from the seller, a $500 credit, that could save the deal. Help the seller's agent frame it as a goodwill gesture, not an admission of wrongdoing. So, sellers are going to get upset. I've taken good care of my house. It's in good shape. I'm not giving them anything. I already came off the purchase price, blah, blah, blah. Whatever reason they're giving. You just want to tell them, look, every side of a deal wants to feel like they're getting their best deal possible. The seller's going to want to get as much as they can. The buyer's going to want to get as much off as they can. So let's see if we can find some middle ground that works for everybody. So even to say, hey, we'll give $500 towards your closing costs in lieu of repairs, or off of the purchase price in lieu of repairs. That sometimes is going to hold your deal together, because the buyer is going to feel like, okay, we won, we got something, but the seller's also going to feel like, hey, we won, we didn't have to fix anything. So it helps on both sides.
I mean, the survey, the listing agent said, okay, my buyers will pay $1,000 for the survey. So I told my client, I said, hey, the survey's $1,400. They're saying they'll pay $1,000. So
Right, they're covering the majority of it, so can't you cover just this little bit to hold the deal together? And remind them too, at the end of this, you're walking away with X amount of money. This is a little drop in the bucket, and if you're not willing to do anything, you're going to get nothing.
It's gonna be the same somewhere else.
Yeah,
too.
and the chances are, if you go back on the market, now you know about these problems, you're going to have to disclose them. So chances are the next buyer in play is going to want them fixed just the same. So we have this deal locked in. Let's make it work.
That's a good rebuttal.
they should have been longer.
Unpermitted additions. This is a title and legal issue as much as an inspection issue. Unpermitted additions like a finished basement, a garage conversion, an added bathroom can affect financing and a future resale. So you want to contact the local municipality, building, planning and zoning, find out if retroactive permitting is possible. Many jurisdictions will allow it. If the seller built the addition, they may need to pull permits and have it inspected and approved before closing. And in some cases, this is a reason for a price negotiation, or in the worst case, a contract termination. So with this, we've come across this before too. A lot of times it's closing in a back porch, making another room there. Finished basements are not as big of a problem for permitting, because appraisers don't typically count a finished basement as finished area because it's below grade. So that's not going to hurt you so much on resale as like a closed-in garage would.
So they go back and pull, see if there was permits when they're
Yes.
always,
So
or
I'm sorry, who?
they do that always, like the lenders or whoever, what you're talking about. Like just say if I listed a house and it had a nice enclosed back porch that became the den or something.
Yeah, when the appraisal is
they're
done,
automatically going
the underwriter is going to see that
with
garage got finished in on the appraisal or whatever. And then that underwriter is going to want to know that it was permitted. So yes, they're going to go back looking for permits to make sure that it was done up to code.
That was my, that was a
Yes,
good question.
so when
I was
you're
gonna ask
listing or selling a property and you see a conversion like that,
The tax assessor side of the show.
yeah, the tax assessor will show whether there's been
that.
permits for it or not.
Sometimes we may not know that there was additions or anything. Me looking at it, I don't have that kind of eye.
Right, you may not, but
But
it's
that
on the
appraisal-
seller's disclosure that says, have you made any changes, structural or additions to the property? If they say yes on there, then, that's a red flag to you right then to say, hey, okay, was this permitted or not permitted? And let's go ahead, like at the beginning of the listing, and head this off and talk to the county and see, can we get inspections done on this? Because an FHA buyer, and I think a USDA buyer too, right? A VA, any government-backed loan has to have those additions permitted. Now, conventional is not always going to be the case. It's going to depend on what that addition is. But we do see a lot of closed-in garages where you pull up and you'll see the garage doors still even, but you get inside and they've built a room in there. So that's something that you want to
like on that
have a conversation
extra
about.
deed, where did you find that deed? Because I didn't see it on the property report. You just went to the tax report.
There is that, the Georgia, what is that called? GSCCCA.org or gov. I think it's gov.
GSCCCA.
Dot gov org.
Yep.
Okay, GSCCCA.org. That's a paid website where I think it's like $5 a month or something. It's very beneficial to have.
It makes
So-
money if you print on the page.
Yeah, so
Per page.
if you download something from the site or you print it from the site, then you pay like maybe $1 per page or whatever. But what I did was I went on that site. That still counts, and it doesn't blow up. I've tried screenshotting, and it doesn't give you a clear image. Especially, you can get plats on there, you can get deeds on there, you can research if there's any kind of liens against a property on there. So it is a really good resource for agents to have.
So if, on my brother's land, Eric would have found any liens or anything?
Yes, an attorney does a title search looking for any liens. What they are looking at is a lot of the same as what you can pull up on GSCCCA. So I went on there, Tim, for yours, and I searched the original owners' names. And that's where I found that second piece of land. Well, I found that on the tax record. And then when I searched his name, it pulled up that separate deed. So then it also pulled every one of those quitclaim deeds that she went to the courthouse to get. All of that, everything that's filed and recorded at any courthouse in Georgia is going to filter through
Awesome.
to that site. So that's going to save you from having to run, go get a copy of a plat, run, go get a copy of a deed, all of that.
Different counties and
Mhm.
stuff. That's good.
This lesson was, like you said, when I took it, a very good learning experience.
For your listing that you're working now, it is. You're getting a lot of good in-depth working with investors. You're doing title issues. You're doing estate problems. Yeah, you're getting a good round lesson in everything.
Thank you.
All right, so moving right along because there's a lot to cover here. Pest and termite damage. Many lenders, especially FHA and VA loans, require pest inspection as part of the loan approval. Know this before the inspection period ends. I try to remember when I'm writing a contract to always ask for the seller to provide a termite inspection, especially if it's FHA and VA. In Georgia, termites are very bad just because of the kind of soil we have.
Or second worst.
The second worst in the nation as far as termites go. So you're always going to want a termite letter. Ask the seller. If they do, then that's great. That means they're getting regular treatments already, and all they have to do is call that company and tell them, hey, I'm selling my house. I need a termite letter. And they're going to come out and look at the house. It's going to be inspected within 30 days of your contract. Send that over to the buyer. Perfect. Everybody's happy. Also, if they're already in a termite bond, if that inspector finds something, they're going to just cover taking care of it.
Is that only like a 2 or 3 year old house too?
Any house.
Any house?
A brand new house gets termite treatment when it's built. So what termites look for is wet, wood, and dark. That's where they thrive. So that's why when you go in like a crawl space or a basement, if it's got termites, you're going to see a little tunnel going up the wall made out of dirt, because that termite's going to want to stay in the dark. So they're going to build a tunnel as they go up to get to that wood. And that's going to let you know that this is a termite problem. It kind of looks like how it looks like dirt dauber nests. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I think we have that where I live. It's like I thought it was bees or something.
Yeah, and it probably is if it's like up high and it's
Okay.
made out of dirt. That's
If it's coming
probably
out of the dirt going towards the foundation.
Well, actually, it's in the wood, but
If it's coming from dirt.
see the termite's going to come from the ground,
okay.
and it's going to be a lot smaller, like maybe like a 1/4 inch wide, and you might see several little paths, several different little tunnels where it's coming up out of the dirt, and it'll. When they're just starting, maybe it hadn't made it to the wood yet. That's still evidence of a termite infestation. So it's going to still have to be treated. But if we get ahead of that up front with a listing and ask that seller, are you under a termite bond? Because certain types of loans are going to require a termite inspection. And if they say no, well, hey, let's go ahead and get a termite inspection so that we know for sure we don't have an issue.
Should I go back and, the one I have, and go Rick and ask him if he's got one?
The seller's property disclosure asks about termite inspections and termite bonds as well. So you can reference back to that if you have active listings now and don't know for sure if they're under a termite bond. If they're not, yeah, go ahead and ask your seller, hey, how do you feel about going ahead and getting a termite inspection so that we have that to give to a buyer? It's going to show that we're proactive, we're taking care of the house, And if there's an issue, we're going to know up front so that we know the cost and what we're going to have to do to deal with it, because that's going to be a problem once we go under contract. Regardless who buys it, we're going to have to deal with it. An inspector might find it. The termite inspector might find it. The buyer themselves might find it. So, and if we know about it, you have to disclose it. Okay, so looking at active infestations versus prior damage. An active infestation requires treatment before closing, but a prior damage requires a structural assessment. So when I closed on Shady Grove Road in Carrollton, that was an investor property where he stripped that house down to bare bones and rebuilt it up. Unfortunately, the basement was basically a big walk-in crawl space. And way off in the far corner, in the dark corner, we never noticed it. He didn't notice it. I didn't notice it. We didn't get a termite inspection up front. Buyer's inspector says, hey, there's termites in here. So we call a termite inspector. He comes out. He gives us a price on treating it. The termite bond that inspector gave was for retreat only. So my buyer said, I'm not real comfortable. We already know there's been termites here. Yes, it's great that you've treated them, but I'm not comfortable with just a retreat only bond. I want a bond that's also going to cover damage for any future termites. So you got two different options there. The retreat's cheaper. The damage treatment is going to be more expensive for whoever's having to pay for that termite bond, but it's also better protection for the buyer, because should termites get in there and they don't notice it quick enough and some wood gets eaten up or whatever, they're not going to want to have to just have the termite company come out and spray it and leave the damage there. They're going to want it fixed. So the termite company that my seller chose to use does not do repair bonds. They only do retreat bonds. So then we had to go find another termite company who was not going to guarantee the first termite company's work. So we had to retreat the house all over again to get that repair and retreat bond. So see, that was a big issue that could have been a deal killer.
Do they jack the price up on that like surveyors do, where they know you gotta have it for closing? Or is it
I
just
don't
a
think
standard
so.
thing?
I think they would have a standard price for treatments. And I mean, if you call ahead, they're going to tell you what their price is. So it's not like they get out there and they're like, oh, you're not going to have a choice. I see you have termites. We're going to charge you $2,000 just because we know that.
Reputable companies don't.
Yeah.
There's always
So
a big-
you're going to want to shop around, call several different companies. And just like with your preferred attorneys, your preferred lenders, you're going to end up with a preferred termite or pest treatment company that you like. You're going to know that you're going to have your go-to guy that you can call and say, hey, I need this house treated for bugs even. Some houses are going to have fleas. Some are going to have roaches. You know, they may have rats. They may have squirrels in the attic. You're going to have your go-to people the more experience you get. So again, when the emotions are running high, and they will be, it's your job to be the most rational person in the room. Print the contractor quotes. Open the contract. Walk everyone through the numbers. Data diffuses emotions. So you're going to want to be talking with your clients of, hey, let's just look at the facts here. I know you're upset. I get it. I would be too. But let's look at the facts. Here's what it's going to cost. Here's what has to be done. Here's what we're going to have to do to move forward. And it's your choice. Are we going to go forward or not go forward? Anytime something comes up in the due diligence that the seller doesn't want to take care of for the buyer, or the buyer is not okay with going forward from there, you got the option of terminating the agreement. But we want to do whatever we can to hold it together. We want to come up with solutions. We don't want to just say, oh, well, that's dead and walk away. Your job through this whole process is to be the calm in the storm. Your clients are going to be looking to you for advice, and they're going to feed off of your emotions. If you're freaking out, they're freaking out. If you're calm, they can freak out and then calm down. So just try to always remain the calm in the storm. All right, now we're going to look at some financing problems and appraisal problems. Why this matters. Financing is the engine of almost every real estate transaction. When that engine sputters, whether due to a loan denial, a low appraisal, change in the buyer's finance situation, the deal is at serious risk. New agents are often caught off guard because they assume the pre-approval letter means the financing is secure, and that is not always the case. Pre-approval is like an estimate. The loan is not real until underwriting has cleared it. So we'll look at the differences between a pre-qualification and a pre-approval and a clear to close. That's 3 different stages in the loan process. It's almost meaningless. A pre-approval is stronger, but it's still not final. Clear to close means that the lender is ready to fund the deal. So that's our happy dance time when we get that clear to close. Appraisals are required by lenders to ensure that they're not lending more than the property is worth. If a home appraises below the purchase price, the loan will only be based on the appraised value, leaving a gap that the buyer must cover. Even after a pre-approval, the buyer's financial situation must remain stable throughout escrow. If they make any major purchases, any job changes, any new debt, that can all trigger a denial. So when you go under contract working with a buyer, you're going to want to tell them up front, do not do anything that will cause your credit to be pulled. Do not use your credit cards. Do not make a new purchase. Make sure your credit remains where it's at right now, and don't quit your job. We've had it happen. If a buyer quits their job, they have killed their deal. Unless they can get another job like that that's going to pay them equal or better in the same line of work that they were already approved with. So why do you think that buyers sometimes take out a new car loan or make large purchases right after their offer is accepted?
Because their credit is good, but it's working now. They know that their credit, they can do it. Because they have the credit, they have good credit.
They think the hard part with their loan is over.
Well, I think they want to look at the credit once.
Right. They think the lender has already pulled my credit. I'm already approved. They're not going to see what happens from here forward. Not true. Your job is to set those expectations at the very beginning. Loan denials after contract execution. This is every agent's nightmare, but it happens. Common causes is undisclosed debt, a recent job change, or something unexpected in a background check. The first step is to contact the lender immediately to understand the specific reason for the denial. Sometimes it's fixable. Maybe they're missing some documentation, or maybe they can dispute a credit item. Sometimes people will have something show up on their credit report that they were not even aware of. And, you may call the lender and figure out what it is. And that might be something that they paid off, but it just hasn't reported to the credit bureau or something like that. If your finance contingency is still active, then your buyer can likely exit the contract and get their earnest money back. But if that contingency has expired, it gets complicated. Help the buyer explore alternative lending options, a different type of loan maybe. Because sometimes if you do FHA instead of conventional, or you go with a different lender, or you add a cosigner, all of a sudden you're back in the game. Also with our new lender that we had the meeting with a few weeks back, there's that lease option with option to purchase. So with that, basically that company is buying the house instead of them, and they're renting it until they get their credit to a place where they can buy. You've just saved that deal if you can do something like that.
Open door.
It's not Open Door. It's her name is Modesty, and it's on one of our training videos. So if you go to the YouTube channel, you can find it on there where we did a meeting with her.
A quick question about mortgage people.
Anouk, yeah.
Like if she's the assigned lender on my leads, does she reach out to me if they contact her, or she just
Yes, she reaches out to you, and she's in Bold Trail as well. So she may go into your contact and put a message directly to you that says, hey, this lead wasn't the person that it said it was,
Right.
but I still talked to them about whether they were interested in, a mortgage or purchasing, and they're not interested at this time. Or she, could save that lead and be like, hey, this person's name is blah, 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 and they do want to buy a house coincidentally, even though that's not the person that came through on the lead.
There's one on there for 2.4 million on mine, but he won't answer the phone. He
Yeah.
can't text him.
Yeah.
So
So
if it says he didn't check the box, can you call him from your cell phone?
yeah, you can call them.
I did already, but.
Yeah. Because checking those boxes is just whether they're okay with emails and text messages. You can make that phone call. And if he tells you, hey, I'm not interested or whatever, then you move on. All right. Issue number 2 is going to be a low appraisal. This is extremely common, especially in fast moving markets where the prices rise faster than the appraised value can keep up. Let's look at a scenario. The contract price is $350,000. The appraisal came in at $330,000. The lender will only base that loan on the $330,000. That's a $20,000 price gap, and somebody's going to have to cover that gap. So you have some options. Option A, the seller can reduce the price to $330,000. Option B, the buyer can pay $20,000 for the price gap in cash. Or C, the buyer and seller can split the difference. Or you can also contest the appraisal. What that means is you're going to send other comps to the appraiser that says, hey, look at these houses. This is more like what I'm selling here instead of what you comped it to. You're going to want to look at that appraisal line by line. How did they compare what you have to other houses?
So you can call the appraiser and say that house was a distress sale.
Right.
Or whatever.
Yeah. And you can ask them, hey, can we take another look at this? You're going to want to be very respectful because appraisers get very irritated when somebody critiques their work. Like anybody, they feel like they did a good job. It's done. They're ready to get paid and move on. And when you dispute an appraisal, you're putting them right back into one that they've already dealt with and finished. So you're going to want to be, super nice. You're going to want to be like, hey, I really appreciate this appraisal, but I was looking at comp number, blah, blah, blah. And I really feel like that's what drug us down on our price point. And if you could consider this one or that one instead, I feel like it'll be a more realistic comparison to what we have. I was just catching up where I'm at here. Okay, so you're going to want to work really closely with the lender at this point. When the appraisal gets ordered, you're going to want to stay in touch with that lender. The listing agent is going to get a call when the appraiser goes out. The lender is going to tell you when that appraisal is due back if you're on the buyer's side. Once that appraisal is due back, you're going to want to be in communication. Hey, did you get the appraisal? Did we come in good? Was there any required repairs from the appraiser? That's different from your home inspection. On FHA and VA houses, the appraiser could say, this is an issue that's going to have to be taken care of in order for this house to get this type of loan, because they have a set list of rules for VA, what they require in the house. They have a set list of rules for FHA. It could be things like the pickets on the porch might be too far apart, or there might not be a rail and the porch is too high off the ground. A home inspector might not call that out because the rail, it doesn't look like it would need one, or it's got a rail there and the pickets are just a distance apart. The home inspector might be like, hey, that's fine. But an appraiser could say, no, that's not going to meet the requirements of FHA.
The lender orders the appraisal, right?
The lender orders the appraisal, yes.
And then they tell, what you just said, they tell you?
Yes, if
So you
issues
need to-
come back. So first, the lender that you're talking to is going to get the copy of the appraisal, and then underwriting is going to look at it. And any issues that's in that, so they may say, yeah, we've got it in, we're reviewing it, I'll let you know. It came in at value, I'll let you know if there's any issues. So when the underwriter reviews it, anything that appraiser called out, then they're going to come back and say, okay, we got an FHA loan here, the porch railing pickets are too far apart. And just so you know, it's 4 inches, isn't it? It's
Usually,
basically like your fist or a softball.
or a foot.
Huh?
Foot, fist.
Yeah, anything about that size. So you can kind of eyeball it and know if your pickets are this far apart. The thing about it is they don't want it to be where a child can fit their head through it because that's dangerous.
Mhm.
And government-backed loans really want to make sure that the house you're getting is safe.
Yeah.
So they call out things like ground
You get
fault.
sued, you may not be able to make the payments.
Ground fault outlets near water. So in your kitchen and bathroom and outside, they're going to have those outlets that, would pop the breaker
Yeah.
on the outlet. And sometimes those are daisy chained together. So if you got one ground fault in the kitchen and all the rest don't look like they are, they're probably daisy chained to that one, which means if something goes wrong on that one, it's going to pop the breaker on this one.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's just one in the bathroom and all of the ground fault stuff triggers off that one bathroom one. So that's something that the inspector can check on. But usually if you're on the seller's side, the homeowner's going to know because at some point they would have popped that and had to reset it. Okay, so issue number 3, the buyer loses their job or takes on new debt. This is preventable if you have that conversation up front. You tell them from now until closing, do not change jobs, do not take on new debt, do not make large cash deposits, and do not co-sign on anybody else's loan. If a job loss happens, contact the lender immediately. Some programs allow for quick reemployment verification. Others will require the whole deal to be reconstructed. Say they got new debt, a new car loan, or a new credit card. The lender will pull a soft credit pull right before closing. And those new debts can change the debt to income ratio and kill the loan.
Even a bunch of inquiries.
Huh?
Even a bunch of inquiries.
Yes.
from Car dealers.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Talk about 10 at one time.
Right. If you've got a buyer whose credit score is on that line
Mhm.
and they went out, buyers, they love to have new furniture in their new house.
Yeah.
They go out to the furniture store and the furniture store says, "Oh yeah, we're not going to pull your credit or anything. We're just going to, it's a soft pull, just to make sure we can see what you can do, blah, blah, blah." And they're going to sweet talk them because that's a salesman too. They're going to want to make a deal, but make sure they understand. Do not let your credit be pulled by anybody. Don't give them your social security number. It's that easy. That way it didn't happen. Because if they're asking for it, they're going to pull it. Last minute document requests. Okay, so a lot of times when you go through the deal, right before closing, the underwriter is going to ask for some documents. They may want explanation letters for large deposits. They may want proof of a rental history. They may want additional tax returns. They may want clarification on some self-employment income. They may want a more recent check stub. They may want a more recent bank statement, any of that, and the buyer's going to feel like, what do they want next? My firstborn or some blood or an organ? Because it is a lot, but you have to remind that buyer through the process, hey, they're giving you a lot of money and trusting that you're going to pay it back. So they want proof that you can afford it. So don't let them get upset. Tell them, hey, this is the process everybody goes through. It's nothing personal against you. This is just what they have to do in order to meet the requirements. You can establish a document checklist with a lender at the very start of the escrow. You can say, hey, what documents do we need to have ready so nothing slows us down? And again, when you work with your preferred lender, you're going to know that up front. You're gonna have that rolling off the back of your mind, or you may have it where you can print it out and give it to a buyer. Okay, we're signing a contract. We got it back on both sides. I'm emailing you a list of documents that your lender's going to need so that you can go ahead and start collecting these. You can create a shared folder with your buyer that they can drop documents into when requested, like on Dropbox. With that, you can put the property address, let the buyer put their documents straight into that, so that if the lenders lose stuff, they're human. They get, they may have 50 deals going at once when things are running great. And, it might have got lost in an email and not put into their file on the lender end. Buyers get frustrated. I already sent that to them. They already have that. They should already have that. Well, if you've got it in a file as well, or you can even say, hey, anytime you send documents to the lender, go ahead and copy me on that. Just in case it gets lost, I'll have it too. And you don't have to go back searching for it again. I can just shoot it to the lender right away. So that's things that you can do to
We
head
need to
off.
load all that into Bold Trail if they send it, or just keep a folder in our email.
You can put it in Bold Trail in unsorted documents, or you can have a separate, it's up to you. We don't really have a limit on Bold Trail document space wise, but if you have your own Dropbox, you will be limited. So, it might be better for you to put it on Bold Trail. You can also, if you have it on Bold Trail, you can share immediately to the lender from Bold Trail too. So that might be the easier process for you. Interest rates change. This is a big one. In a rising rate environment, a buyer who qualified for 7 may not qualify at 7.5. So you want to tell your buyer, we want to lock your rate as soon as possible. And this is going to be a conversation the lender's going to have with them, but it's good for you to back that up and have it with them too. So rates change every day. And the lender is going to kind of track they're looking at rates every day. So they're kind of tracking a trend. If a lender says, hey, I'm expecting the rates to go up, you're going to want to go ahead and lock, because we want to make sure they can still buy. So for the rate lock, usually you have to have the property under contract already, and a lender can float a little bit. That's what it's called when they're waiting for a better rate. They can float a little bit. But if somebody is on the fence where it could cause them not to qualify, you better lock already where they do qualify. Because if it goes up half a point instead of down half a point, they have no deal anymore. Locks also have expiration on them. So you want to understand that and have that relative to your closing date. The lender's going to look at that too. So if you've got a contract, say the seller says, hey, I need 60 days before we close. You're not going to want to lock an interest rate, or the lender's not going to want to lock a 45-day lock for the interest rate, because you're not closing for another 15 days past that. Now, lenders can extend a lock, but it costs that buyer money. The lender may say, I'll cover the extension, because they do have some flexibility there too. But it's better to hit these problems up front so that we got a 60-day contract, we need a 60-day lock.
They just make their money, don't they? They earn.
So even if a buyer's rate increases significantly and they no longer qualify for that same loan amount, you can go back and negotiate with the seller again. Hey, we got a finance contingency. The buyer's rate has changed to X amount, which causes them to no longer qualify. So in order for them to be able to buy this house, we need the purchase price to be X. The seller may say, hey, we've gone this far. We got a good deal. Maybe they got asking price and have some room to move. Maybe they felt like, hey, we've made jumbo bucks already. I don't know what their situation might be, but if they've got some flexibility there, you could save the deal by going back renegotiating at that point. You don't just go ahead and send a termination and say, we're out. The buyer, it doesn't approve anymore. You want to go through every possible avenue. Try a different lender. Some lenders are going to have lower score requirements than others, which, some lenders may not look at something on their credit that another lender would. So don't let them just give up. Say, hey, let's see if we can save this. I have another lender who does some alternative finance things that might be able to do it. Let's, try out some different options before you just let it go. It's always better to have a solution when you're presented with a problem. So that's what you're going to want to do. When that lender calls you and says, we've got a problem, you're going to say, okay, we need a solution. Before we go to the buyer, let's figure out what our options are and present a solution to them instead of just going to them to freak them out. That way you're remaining the calm in the storm. I know this looks bad, customer, client, but here's what we're going to do to fix it. And that's going to calm their nerves. So in saying all of that, your lender relationship is one of the most valuable assets in your business. A trusted lender will pick up their phone 24/7. They'll know which underwriter to call. They'll fight for your clients. They will interview your So interview your lenders before you refer them. They are an extension of your service. So that's like, again, you're creating a team, and it's really hard when you first get going of who to trust, who's going to be on my team, who's going to fit with my personality, who's going to be willing to jump when I need them to. And there's all kinds of lenders out there.
I'm going through that right now with several.
Yes.
Like the one, not gonna say names, told me that they would put their sign on my listing and offer $2,500 closing costs. And like I sent them the list and I said, hey, do you still want to do that? No, which one?
Yeah.
So they're thinking, well, okay.
Yeah,
I'll
what
find
happened to
somebody
you?
else.
Right. Because your job is to get that house sold for as much money as possible, and any outside funds is only going to help that transaction for the seller and the buyer. All right, now we're going to look at some title issues. Tim is all up in this neck deep right now. Title is the legal foundation for every real estate transaction. When you sell a home, you're not just transferring a building, you're transferring legal ownership. So any unresolved claims, liens, defects on that title is called a cloud on the title. And it can prevent a clean transfer. These issues are invisible until the title search is conducted, which is why ordering it as early as possible is important. Now, some attorneys won't order title until you're through with due diligence. The reason for that is because they're having to pay for that title search. They've got, somebody that they hire to go out and pull those documents. We've had attorney issues before where they didn't pull title until last minute, and then there's problems. And we're like, if you had pulled title up front, we would have had so much more time to deal with this. So that's where you're going to want to vet your attorneys. Hey, are you good with pulling title up front? Or when do you pull title? If they don't pull title until the due diligence time ends, then you're going to want to try to have shorter due diligence time so you have more contract time to figure out any issues. And you're going to have a buyer who may say, hey, I'm only off on the weekend. I know today is Sunday and that's where we're writing our contract, but I'm really going to need through next weekend for my inspection because that way we can do it on Saturday when I'm off again. Well, you may say, okay, we're going to need to push to the following Monday so that you got time to negotiate. If you're going to do your inspection on Saturday, you might not get that report back till Saturday night or Sunday or even Monday morning. So you're going to need time to negotiate whatever comes up on that. So be sure that you tell your buyer, this attorney that we're using or my preferred attorney or whatever, they won't pull title until our due diligence time is over. That means if there's any kind of title issue, we are losing time by just waiting for this 10 days to come to an end. So we would do better to only have a short inspection time. I know you want to be there for the inspection. I can be there on your behalf. My inspector does a very thorough inspection. He takes pictures. He gives a good summary, whatever you need to do, or maybe even say, hey, this is a big purchase, probably one of the biggest purchases you're going to make. So don't you think that's important enough to take a day off work and be there? That way, you can shorten that inspection time. You can get that title search started early. You can get, any issues that you need to working out. So this little note says, think of a title issue like termites. You can't see them until you look carefully. And by the time they're obvious, they're already causing damage. So you want to get on that as quickly as possible and exterminate any problems before closing day. Outstanding liens or judgments. Liens are legal claims against a property that must be resolved before title can transfer. Common types is a mortgage lien, which is expected. You want to pay off that seller's current mortgage, and that can be handled at closing, of course. Mechanics liens. This happens a lot on new construction. A contractor, a subcontractor, or a supplier didn't get paid for the work that they did. So they put a mechanics lien against the property. That doesn't go against the builder. That goes against that house. And sometimes that can be put on without the homeowner even knowing it. There can be tax liens, which is unpaid federal, state, or local taxes. There can be IRS liens. There can be judgments, a court judgment against the seller attached to the property. Once a lien is discovered, you want to get it paid off and get a payoff in writing from the lien holder. Most liens can be paid at closing from the seller's proceeds, but you need to know that exact amount early. There can be boundary disputes and encroachment issues. Surveys reveal the exact legal boundaries of a property. Encroachments happen when a structure, such as a fence, a shed, a driveway, crosses onto a neighbor's property. Minor encroachments, like a fence a few inches over the line, is often resolved with an easement or a written agreement between the neighbors, but major encroachments like a garage or an addition onto the neighbor's land is far more serious and can require legal action or even demolition. You want to always recommend a surveyor for any property where the boundaries are not crystal clear, especially rural properties or lots without buildings. Missing heirs or estate complications. Tim, when a property is being sold as part of an estate, multiple heirs have ownership interest. If not all heirs are identified and sign off on the sale, the title is not clear. This is more common than you think, especially when estates haven't been probated, which is what Tim is dealing with now. Resolution often requires a probate attorney, and it can take months.
Well, if you do it by yourself, like they did, it's been 3 months and it was supposed to be done,
Yeah, it can take months to get it through.
but it wasn't done.
If this surfaces mid-transaction, you want to loop in legal help immediately, which is what we did with Tim's. We found out he's got a property under contract. They probated it themselves. However, there's another piece of the property that's deeded separate that did not get probated from a previous owner from the one that they probated. So it's a big mess. Estate sales with a court-appointed administrator or executor are generally cleaner because they have a legal authority to sell. So what this is meaning is it's been through probate and somebody has been appointed on title to sell this property. HOA violations and unpaid dues. In HOA communities, unpaid dues and special assessments or unresolved violations can be a cloud on the title and create post-closing liability for the buyer. Request an HOA closing letter early in the transaction. So you're selling a house, you know it's in a community that has swim and tennis, you know on the disclosure that it's got a HOA. Make sure the attorney has that information and tell them, let's go ahead and get an HOA closing letter ordered in case there's a problem with it. If you're on the seller side, let's ask some questions. Have you gotten any letters from the HOA, any fines, any issues that the HOA has had? Do you know what they charge to transfer to the new buyer? Because there's fees associated with that. If the seller has unpaid dues, they can be paid at closing from the seller's proceeds, but you want to get that amount in writing from the HOA, and that can delay closing. We've had closings before where we're just waiting on the HOA to send us over the closing letter so that the attorney can know how much to put on that statement. If there's any unresolved violations, again, that's going to be on the association disclosure. If there's an unauthorized fence, if they painted something with a color that wasn't approved, the seller may need to remedy those things before closing, because if they don't, that could cause assessment fees to your buyer once you're closed. Because once that buyer owns it, if there's something against the HOA, it's the buyer's problem at that point, no longer the seller's. Larry, have you texted them yet? I don't know.
I haven't got anything seconded.
There could be deed errors or incorrect legal descriptions. Again, the problem on the one that Tim. So Tim's dealing with this estate sale where it didn't get probated properly, doesn't have a survey, so the corners aren't for sure, and it doesn't have a legal description because there was never a survey done to this specific property. So the legal description in place is old from back when it went from the center line of the road to the neighbor's property behind. And so there was no allotment for easement, for the road easements for either side or setbacks off of the road. So the acreage amount that's shown on the tax deed or tax report may not be what comes back on the new survey, because there's going to be some easement there. Of course, it may not be a big amount. It depends on how much road frontage you have, but it's still, now a survey is required because we've got to get that legal description and we've got to know exactly where the corners of the property are. And we need those two pieces combined to one.
So the one piece can't be, since Connie had everything signed over her and that got probated and Cody was in charge of it, can that one piece not just be combined with that without being probated? Since it's already.
No, because it's two separate owners.
Mm. Mm.
I'll just look at it.
Okay.
Mm.
All right, repair negotiations. Repair negotiations is a distinct phase that follows the inspection. Once the inspector's report is in hand, the real work begins, determining what gets fixed, who pays for it, and how the parties come to an agreement without blowing up the deal. This is one of the areas where a skilled agent adds the most value to their client. The agent's role: you are not a contractor. You are not an appraisal. You are a professional negotiator and advisor. Your job is to help your client identify what matters most, quantify the cost, and present reasonable requests that the other side can accept without feeling attacked. The mindset to share with other agents. Repair negotiations are not a second bite at the apple for the buyer to renegotiate the price. They're not an attack on the seller for the condition of their home. They're a professional discussion about material defects and how to address them before closing. Imagine you're representing the seller. The buyer just submitted a repair request for 22 items, including a chipped cabinet door, a dripping faucet, a missing GFCI outlet. How does your seller feel? And how do you respond? This helps the buyer's agent understand the perspective and the seller's agent understand the importance of coaching your clients on reasonable responses. So if you got this report back and you got 22 items there, so I would say, let's look at what's most important to you out of these 22 items. To me, that missing GFCI is number one. That could kill the deal because financing is not going to allow it. Dripping faucet, I mean, that's a very cheap fix. You said you didn't like the faucet anyway and was going to put a new one in. The new one's not going to drip. This one just probably has a bad little O-ring in it, something small. It's, it's not huge. And chipped cabinet door, come on. It's not a brand new house. The cabinets are not going to be perfect. You saw that when we looked at the house to start with. You knew it was there, and yet you saw the value in the house even with the chipped cabinet door. Let's look at the GFCI and move on,
This is good stuff. That's a this is good stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say that the buyer and seller can't agree on the scope of work to be done or a credit. This is the most common repair negotiation breakdown. The buyer wants $8,000 in credit. The seller's only offering $2,000. Let's start by categorizing the repairs into health and safety items, which are non-negotiable and must be addressed. Major system issues, which is very strong negotiating position, and then cosmetic and maintenance items. This is a weak negotiating position. This is going to be, so usually we'll take the cosmetic and maintenance because that's just things you're going to expect with a house, unless if it's brand new and they didn't put the drip line for the condensation line out far enough from the house. We want that moved, known better when they built it, that sort of thing. A well-structured initial request that focuses on the first two categories gives you far more credibility and often gets better results than a shotgun list. Think about it if you were on the seller's side and you get this amendment to address concerns and it's, lengthy. First thing you're going to think is this is ridiculous. Because it's a good house. You've been in it. They've been in it. The other agent's been in it. It's a good house. So why are they nitpicking all these different things? So it's going to be important to you to display your amendment into those three categories. Let's look at some structural issues. Then let's look at some mechanical issues. And if there's something cosmetic that, the buyer is just adamant about having on there, that's going to be bottom of the list. And you're going to tell them, this is the things that if they come back without this, we've still got a good deal here. For the things that need to be fixed, let's go ahead and set up some contractors to come out and give some estimates for repairs. The lower than what a seller is expecting. The seller may have people in their network that they know that can give them good estimates. The buyer may have some contractors that they know or somebody that can do the work that they're aware of. And they may be very different, the estimates that the seller gets from what the buyer gets. The solution to that is you're going to want to say in your amendment that we want licensed insured contractors that's acceptable to both parties, and specify that, because we don't want the seller to use some buddy that, sometimes does electrical work on the side, but he's not an electrician, coming in messing with the breaker panel. However, if it's switching out an outlet, that's kind of a no-brainer. And all you got to do is unplug it and plug the wires of the new one back in and pop it in. Easy peasy. So you got to kind of look at what's needed and whether or not you're going to need a licensed professional to do it. And then you're going to want both sides to be happy with what's done. So if the buyer's okay with just handyman fixing it and the seller's got a handyman who can fix it, fine, let's use just a handyman. But if the buyer wants it done by a professional and the seller doesn't want to use a professional, you got a problem there. You're going to have that in writing, that it has to be a licensed insured contractor. And on the buyer's side, you may want to say, hey, I want a copy of their license and insurance deck page. That's going to let you know that they're legit. Obi had one in Alabama where she had asked, she was representing the buyer, and they had asked for a licensed insured roofer to fix a problem with the roof. The lender, I think, had somebody that they knew. No, it was the listing agent had somebody that they knew who was licensed and insured, sent them out there to make the repair. The repair ended up not fixing the problem. After closing, the roof is still leaking, or whatever the issue was, it's still a problem. Come to find out, his license had expired. So he wasn't even really a licensed roofer at the time.
So can they go back on that?
They could go back and sue that contractor for not being licensed when they had presented as a licensed contractor, yeah. Or even the seller for that matter, because they hired. But here's where things went wrong on that. The buyer, instead of going out and looking at the repair themselves and making sure that it was done to their standards, they had Ovi just look at it, who is not a roofer. She's not the buyer. She's not a inspector.
Mm.
She goes out and looks at it and she's like, looks okay to me. How do you know? I'm not a professional.
Oh man.
And so they went ahead and closed, and then he's upset. Well, he was fine with it from just what she said. So that ended his right to go after anybody. He tried. No attorney would touch it because he said, I'm good with it. It's fine.
Wow.
He was crazy.
I do not want to put myself in that situation.
Right. You always want to make sure that you are not representing yourself as a professional in anything other. Just text her and tell her we haven't got anything.
But even if our client asks us to do something of that sort,
Then you say, I'm not a professional, but I'll go look at it and let you know what I think.
Yeah,
But ultimately, you need to be the one to put your eyes on it to your client. That's what you're going to say.
Yeah.
So let's say that you had the seller make some repairs, and the repairs are inadequate at your final walkthrough. Again, prevention. Require a reinspection by the original inspector. Whoever said there was a problem, or the contractor, whoever said there was a problem up front, ask them to come back out and make sure that that problem is fixed instead of you being the one to go out. If the buyer finds that the repairs are inadequate at a walkthrough, that's not the time to litigate. You have to document with photos, get a professional assessment, contact the listing agent calmly, and then see if you can do a small escrow holdback for incomplete repairs. That's your fastest solution. Never let walkthrough disputes become a closing day blow up. Try to address it 24 to 48 hours before closing. So with repairs, when I write up my repair amendments, I usually say that I want these repairs completed prior to, or 5 days prior to closing, something like that. And then when that time limit ends and it's 5 days ahead of closing, I want to go out there with my client or get the contractor out there or whatever and make certain that those repairs are done. Your final walkthrough on closing day is just to make sure that a tree hasn't fell on the house, the seller didn't walk off with the air conditioner, somebody didn't break in and steal the plumbing. Yeah, all of those kind of things. You want to make sure the seller is out of the house. That's what you're looking at on your final walkthrough on closing day. That's not time that you've missed the time when you should have went back on repairs that should have been done. So if your repair addenda does have a deadline, again, you want to make sure you get out there and do that reinspection. Make sure that you have any deadlines in your contract on calendar reminders for you. In Bold Trail, on our contract checklist, on the buyer and seller side, you can add your deadlines on each of those. And when you do those, it's going to come up red on your tasks of things that you need to take care of when that deadline is approaching. I would set mine a day ahead because you don't want to be on the day that's the deadline and freaking out running around. If you get that a day ahead, that gives you 48 hours instead of the 24, really instead of 12. Because if you get it the morning of the deadline, you've really only got until the end of that day. And you may not be able to get somebody out there same day to look at the repairs or whatever. You may have to do a amendment to extend that deadline or whatever, or extend the closing so that you can get the issues taken care of. Never assume verbal extensions are enforceable. That's something else we want to talk about. Anything you have to extend on your contract, make sure it is in writing and signed by all parties before that deadline comes. Like for instance, on your survey where you've got the buyer willing to pay $1,000, there needs to be an amendment that says a new survey will be obtained by the seller. The buyer will contribute $1,000. When? At the time of the survey, or at closing, or when? And everybody signs that. That way there's no going back on it. Needs to be everything in writing. When you suggest a seller credit instead of the seller completing the repairs, you're doing everyone a favor. The seller doesn't have to manage contractors, and the buyer gets to choose their own contractors and the quality of the work. Most importantly, both sides avoid a walkthrough dispute over whether the repairs were done correctly. Credits close deals, repairs create arguments. So you can do that in two ways. You can say at closing, the seller will give the buyer a credit of X dollars for making the following repairs. Or It can be additional closing costs. It can be off of the asking price. It can be specific contractors. At closing, the seller will issue payment to whoever to complete whatever repairs. That way it gets done after closing, to the contractor that the buyer wanted, to the quality of work that the buyer wanted. Closing delays. Everyone has the closing date circled on your calendar. The movers are scheduled, the leases are ending, new appliances are ordered, and hopefully they paid cash. When the closing date moves, even by a few days, the domino effect can be enormous. Understanding what causes delays and how to get ahead of them is one of the most practical skills you can develop as a new agent. Closing delays are not always failures. Some delays are simply the result of normal transaction complexity. What matters is how you manage them, specifically whether you communicate proactively to solve the problem before it becomes a crisis. 2 types of delays: controllable delays, things you can monitor and prevent, missing documents, the repair work not scheduled, title issues not followed up on. Uncontrollable delays might be a processing backlog with the lender, underwriting surprises, title issues, tangled up in the estate. You can't prevent that, but you can manage it. You want to understand the real world impact for your clients. It's going to cost them to stay in a hotel because they can't get in their house. Their storage fees for the seller may be in addition because they're not going to be able to get their money and they've already got everything, set and ready to go. There may be lease penalties. There may be rate lock expiration fees. When you understand what's at stake for your clients, you become much more vigilant. If closing day is on Friday and the lender calls Thursday afternoon to say they need a document, what do you do?
Try to get the document. Call Wendy.
Call Wendy. No, you're going to try to get that document. You're going to want to be proactive. You're going to want to be ahead of that. You want to be checking in with that lender every 2 to 3 days when you're getting close to closing and make sure something like that doesn't happen. But if it does, you work the phones, you, the buyer, the lender, and you don't stop until it's resolved. Or you get an extension, worst case scenario, if it's not something that can be obtained. You go with that other agent, hey, I've done everything in my power to try to get this. Here's when we expect it. We're going to have to do an extension, and I'm sorry. Now, our contracts do have that option for an 8-day unilateral, and that's the kind of situation where you would use that. That's just you giving notice to the other party that, hey, we need 8 more days because we've got a lender delay.
Do you ask just to do an extension so you still have that 8 days?
It depends on what the issue is. If it's something that may not be able to be resolved within that 8-day time, then yes, you're going to want to do an amendment to change the closing date so that you've still got that unilateral if you need it. Now, some other agents may say, no, we're not signing an extension. This is the date we agreed on. This is when we're closing. Use your unilateral. It's built into the contract. They have to allow that additional 8 days. But once that 8 days is gone, that's it. Your deal is dead if you were not in a position to close. Check that for me.
She's already gone back. The
Okay.
agent left way better.
Oh, okay. Okay. What if the lender's not ready by closing date? This is the most common problem of closing delays. Underwriting can move slow, especially during high volume periods or when the buyer's file is complex. High volume periods is going to be like top selling times. That's what we're in right now. Spring and summer is the most moves. So we're going to be the busiest. Lenders are going to be the busiest. Closing attorneys are going to be the busiest. So it's more likely that they may have a stack of files to go through on their desk and yours might not be on top. So again, you're going to want to check in with the lender every 2 to 3 days, starting 2 weeks before closing. Ask specifically, is there any outstanding conditions? Are we on track for closing? If the lender needs more time, prepare a closing extension addendum immediately. Don't wait until the day before. Sellers who feel blindsided are sellers who start looking for other buyers. Communication is key. A well-written extension addendum specifies the new closing date and addresses any per diem costs and is signed by both parties. Per diem costs is saying if we can't close by this date, we're going to pay X dollars. Like on HUD properties, for instance, you get a 45-day to close. If you need to extend that out, they charge $25 a day. Their extension says that you've got to pay the $25 a day, and you've got to pay for 15 days at once. Now, if you don't need all 15 days, you can get a credit back, but for whatever's not used, but you are going to buy that block. Regular real estate contracts are not necessarily going to be that way, but if you're dealing with a bank, they may have a per diem if you miss your deadline. Again, it's important to read your contract. What if your seller can't get out in time? Moving is hard. Sometimes, Tim again, sometimes, same house. I'm telling you, he's got every problem you could have going on that same house.
Actually, they can't.
It's just they won't. Sometimes sellers realize too late that they need more time in a property after closing. The best solution is to have a post-closing occupancy agreement. This is also called a leaseback or holdover agreement. The seller pays the buyer a daily rent. Typically, it would be the amount of the buyer's principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, or basically whatever their house payment would be divided out, to remain in the property for the agreed upon period. Usually no more than 60 days. Some loans, if you write a contract with a lease back for more than 60 days, some loans won't approve that. Like 60 days is the cap. You want to set clear terms, the daily rate, the last day of occupancy, the security deposit held in escrow. The agreement should specify that the property must be returned in the same condition. And again, we have a form for this in our GAR forms. Use that standard form because it's going to cover all of this for you. Attorneys spend a lot of time to make all these papers and cut all these trees down so that we have them available to protect us through transactions and to protect our clients. What if the walkthrough reveals new damage or missing items? The final walkthrough is the buyer's opportunity that they are confirming the property is in the same condition when they sign the contract and agreed repairs are completed. Common surprises. Maybe the seller took a light fixture that was listed in the contract. Maybe a wall was damaged during move. Or maybe the yard was stripped of landscaping that was included. If the walkthrough reveals a problem, do not refuse to close. That creates legal exposure. Instead, document everything with photos and timestamp and negotiate a closing day credit or escrow holdback and sign an agreement of how the issues will be remedied. If the issue is severe, like significant structural damage from a move out, for example, consult your broker and possibly an attorney before proceeding. So again, we want the property to close because everybody's in limbo at that point. And usually that's done like right before headed to the closing table that you've done that very final walkthrough. So you're documenting those things. You're going to communicate with the other agent. And that's better to do before you get to the table and everybody's pissed off. Call that agent. Say, hey, we just did our walkthrough. The chandelier that was in the foyer was not mentioned that it would be removed and it is gone. So how are we going to remedy it? The other agent then is going to get with her client. Hey, are you going to have that chandelier put back, or are you wanting to offer them some money for a new light fixture? And then you're going to negotiate back and forth on how that's going to be remedied.
That happened with your mom's house.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, she broke the globe moving out on an antique light fixture, and then she replaced it with one from Home Depot and brought to closing the broken one in case my mom wanted it. Of course, they were going to do so many changes on the property that it wasn't a huge big deal to do anything after closing about it, but it was a little nerve scrub, like ticked her off a little bit. Closings require a coordinated appearance by multiple parties, the buyer, the seller, the title officer, sometimes the title officer meaning the closing attorney, and sometimes the lender. So you want to make sure that when you're scheduling, you've confirmed with everybody that time is going to work. You don't want to, just take it upon yourself to say it's convenient to me to close at 10 o'clock in the morning. That's what we're going to do. You're going to want to make sure that all parties are in agreement because you need everybody at the table in order to make that closing happen. If there is scheduling conflicts, you can do what is called a split closing. That's where one party is signing at one time and the other party is signing at another time. You're going to make sure that's okay with the closing attorney because that's twice that they have to show up too. Wire fraud. That's another big problem. Never send wire instructions via unsecured email. Always verify the wire instructions by phone before your client sends any funds. Instruct your buyer to wire their funds 24 to 48 hours before closing, not the morning of. Same-day wires frequently fail to post in time for closing, which is going to cause a closing delay. Cannot tell you how many times we've been sitting at the table, we're just waiting for the funds. And, everybody signed everything, but a wire hasn't come through. It could be the lender's funds. It could be the buyer's down payment funds. It could be funds from their other house that the buyer sold that's paying for the house that they're buying. So it's always better to have that stuff wired 24 to 48 hours ahead so that the attorney has it sitting there and knows and can fund at the table. Now, if it's a back-to-back closing on a property sold versus, and then a property bought, I always try to get those at the same attorney's office. That way that one attorney knows that the funds is there from the first one so that he can go ahead and go through with the second one. Let the title company confirm any wires that are sent, any wiring requests that they have. Don't confirm for them because you don't want to be caught in some kind of legal issue where maybe some fraudster came in and sent an email that says, hey, I sent you the wrong wiring instructions. This is the correct ones. That email may look like it came from you, but it may not be true. Let your buyer call the attorney's office and confirm the wiring instructions before they send their money. Wire fraud is really big now. Buyer and seller disputes. Real estate transactions involve one of the largest financial decisions that most people will ever make. They are deeply emotional. Buyers are choosing a home and sellers are leaving one. When stress peaks, communication breaks down and disputes arise. The agent who handles these moments with calm professionalism is the agent who earns lifetime clients and referrals. Your role: you are not a judge, you are not a therapist, you are not a lawyer, you are a professional facilitator whose job is to help two parties reach an agreement that close the transaction legally to the satisfaction of both sides. Now, I do say all the time that I wear many hats. You will, through your real estate career, feel like you are a counselor. You will feel like you got to make decisions for them. People get scared and they do look to you on what to do. And you can advise them, but tell them, ultimately, this decision is yours, not mine. But here's what I would do. You can do that. What not to do. Don't take sides publicly or emotionally, even if your client is clearly right. Inflaming the other side makes resolution harder. So don't be a witch about it. You gotta work together. You're all on the same team, you and that other agent, the buyer and the seller. Our goal is to get to the closing table all together. I'm not working against you. You're not working against me. We're on the same team. Let's figure out a solution. Don't make promises about legal outcomes. Don't tell your client you're definitely going to get your earnest money back. That's never something you should say without consulting the attorney. Don't communicate angry messages between the parties. You are a filter, not a megaphone. So say the seller is pissed off about the repairs that the buyer asked for, and you're on the listing side. Don't call that other agent and be like, your client is an idiot. We're not doing all of this. This is stupid, whatever, Don't blow up. Call them with, hey, we're on the same team. Our goal is to get to closing. What's most important to your buyer so I can take that back to my seller because they're not ready to do all these things. So you're going to want to be calm. Slow things down. Most disputes feel more urgent than they are. So, your seller may say, forget it. I'm just, I'm not doing any of that because, they're ridiculous. Okay, let's take a little bit of time to calm down and see, and then come back to this, because I understand you're mad. You just saw this big, huge list. Let's breathe a minute and then look at it again. I'm going to call you back in 30 minutes or whatever. During that time, call that other agent. Hey, what on this list is most important to your client? That way you kind of get some understanding on where they're at, that you can go back to your seller and say, okay, I talked to the other agent. I know this is a big, long list. The most important things to them is this, this, and this. So if we keep those for sure, is there anything else that you're willing to do outside of these few that's most important to them? Just to show that you're trying to work with them. And then go back with the adjusted list that you've hit the hot points for the buyer, and maybe you did a little extra with, whatever little thing it might be. Focus on the contract. The purchase agreement governs the relationship between the buyer and seller. When there's a dispute, the contract is the answer. Also, involve your broker early. They have experience in these situations and may have relationships with the other brokerage that could help. That is why it's important for you guys to be out social with other agents. I am guilty as the day is long of not doing this, but every single Tuesday, agents are having open houses all over our area. There's food, there's prizes, there's might be gift card giveaways, there might be desserts. These are an opportunity for you to go and meet that other agent, look at the house they have for sale, give them any feedback of what you think about the house, enjoy lunch, maybe win a gift card, maybe meet another lender that you can have in your arsenal of lenders that, your pool that you go to. And I mean, that making that friend with that other agent could be what causes them to accept your offer over somebody else's. They may go to their seller and say, hey, I have met this agent. She is super sweet. She's with a company that is very reputable. I know the lender that she works with. Actually, it's a lender that she picked up at my open house. This looks solid to me. I've never met this other person. I don't know this lender they're working with. I would advise you to see if we can make this deal work over that one. So meeting those other agents is important. At the board office, they have monthly luncheons there where they have some kind of instruction on, different things that they may have a termite company come out. They may have an inspector come out. They may have a lender come out who's going to give a talk presentation that's useful information. You're going to have lunch. You're going to mingle with a bunch of other agents that work in our area. It's very likely that you're going to end up working with them at some point, and you're going to try to build those relationships. Again, real estate is all about relationships. What if the seller refuses to remove their personal property, Tim? Appliances.
I'm trying to confirm the seller movement, and normally I just hit why.
No, I'm just teasing you because your seller, the people didn't want to move their stuff out. The people didn't want to move their stuff out at your house over there.
Oh, yeah.
Or at the one in Carrollton.
Well, they're saying that they just
Don't have the money or whatever.
don't have the money, but
So you want to make sure it's in the purchase agreement. Go in your Showing Time app and you can confirm it there. Make sure that there you go. Make sure that your purchase agreement explicitly lists every item that is included. If the buyer wants the refrigerator, the contract must say so. This is being proactive, ahead of the problem. You don't want that seller to walk off with the refrigerator if it's supposed to be in the deal. Also, I've had times where sellers pulled the stove, sellers pulled the dishwasher, seller pulled the refrigerator. And I go back to them, hey, these things are included. This is why it's important, too, to have your seller's property disclosure as part of your contract, because that shows what's staying with the house. If you don't have that seller's property disclosure on your contract, you have nothing unless you wrote it in special steps that the stove is staying, that the refrigerator is staying, that the blinds are staying, that the doorknobs are staying, that the mailbox is staying. If there's nothing in the contract that says it stays, it does not have to stay. So it's important to attach that to the contract. But when that happens, you call the other party, hey, these things were listed in the contract to stay. We're closing at X time. You need to get them back over here. And I mean, that's going to cause some intense panic for the other party. But hey, they knew what they were doing. So let's say that the buyer wants out of the deal and they don't have a valid contingency to get them out. Once all contingencies are released, the buyer is contractually obligated to close. Cold feet cold feet is not a contract contingency. If the buyer wants out after all contingencies are waived, they risk forfeiting their earnest money, which can be a significant sum. And that's why on the seller's side, it's always good to get as much earnest money as you can, because if that buyer backs out, that's your recourse, is whatever their earnest money was.
I thought you normally put 1%, but
That is a good rule of thumb, to have 1% of what your purchase price is. Your job is to explain their legal exposure. If you cancel now without a valid contingency, you not only may forfeit your $10,000 earnest money, but they may have legal recourse against you, causing you to close. You need to speak to a real estate attorney before you make that decision so that you understand all of the recourse options. Sometimes buyers just need to be talked through their anxiety. Don't assume cancellation is the only option. Address the underlying concerns first. Earnest money disputes. When a deal falls apart, the question of who gets the earnest money is often contentious. The earnest money, which is either held by the closing attorney or the broker, generally goes to the buyer if they canceled under a valid contingency, or the seller if the buyer defaults without justice. However, this is not always clear. Most contracts require both parties to sign a release before the escrow holder can disperse the funds. If they can't agree, the escrow is held and all parties must either mediate or litigate. Involve the broker immediately when there's a earnest money dispute. You need to document every communication, and we will never release earnest money without written authorization. What if you have an unresponsive party? This also happens more than you would think. And it can be a deal killer if the deadlines pass without responses. If you have a client that goes, contact them by every means possible. Text, email, even certified mail if necessary, and document every attempt with timestamps. If the other party or their agent goes silent, send written notice via email, which creates a timestamp of the record. Remind them that deadlines are approaching. Loop in your broker immediately. And know your contract timelines. Many contracts have automatic deadline provisions. If the party doesn't respond by a certain date, a contingency may automatically expire and the default may be triggered. And that could be like proof of funds. Say you have 5 days to show proof of funds. If that buyer disappears and you can't get them on the phone and they don't show proof of funds by day 5, that seller has the right to cancel the contract at that point because they missed that contingency. De-escalation is a skill. When a client is furious, validate their frustration before problem solving. I completely understand why you're upset. Let's take a breath and figure out the best path forward. Trying to solve a problem while they're still venting will feel dismissive. Give them 60 seconds, it says, then redirect to the contract and the options. The contract is the facts of the deal. There's no emotion in that contract. So your client's upset, let's go back to the contract and see what we agreed on. Here it says blah, 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 blah. So we are contractually bound to do whatever it says. Okay, 4 principles in your toolkit. Document everything. This is the single most important habit that a new agent can develop. Documentation protects your clients, protects you, and creates clear records if anything goes wrong. What to document? Every verbal conversation should be followed up by an email confirmation, just confirming our call. Seller agreed to replace the HVAC unit by June 15th. Every negotiation point, every extension, every agreed credit. Use addendas. They exist for a reason. A handshake on repairs or possession date does not become enforceable. You need an assigned addendum. Email is your best friend. It is having trouble talking. It is time-stamped, searchable, hard to dispute. Text messages are also useful, but should be saved, screenshot, or export them at key moments. Real world consequences. I was in a transaction where the seller verbally agreed to leave the riding mower. The buyer shows up after closing, the mower is gone. Because no one wrote it down, there's nothing to enforce. One addendum would have prevented an ugly dispute. Principle number 2, calendar every deadline. Real estate contracts are filled with deadlines. Missing one has serious consequences, from losing a contingency to forfeiting earnest money to triggering a default. Set your calendar system on day 1 for every transaction. List every date from the contract inspection deadline, financing contingencies, repair completion dates, and closing dates. Set reminder alerts for each deadline. Set a reminder 48 hours in advance. This gives you time to act if something is behind schedule. A transaction management system. Many brokerages provide one. This is our back office. This is where you're going to go in, where I was saying before. You can put your deadline dates into your checklist so that you're going to see that when you open your transaction or you open back office, it's going to give you those red line items. This is what's behind, or this is what's coming up. This is what needs to be taken care of. So that before you get sidetracked doing 100 other things in the day, you make sure that you're on top of the things that your time is limited on. If a deadline is going to be missed, get that extension in writing before the deadline passes, not after. Principle 3, know your contract. The purchase agreement is the governing document for everything that happens in a transaction. Agents who know it, typo here, I'm like, cold, what? Could resolve disputes faster, negotiate more efficiently, and protect their clients better. Read the entire contract, not just the price and the closing date. Understand the contingency language, the default provisions, the dispute resolution clauses, and the personal property inclusions. Know your state-specific contract forms and how it's different from other state forms. In Georgia, the standard contract has specific timelines and remedies that differ from what you've heard from agents in other markets. When in doubt, call your broker. They've read hundreds of these contracts and can tell you in 5 minutes what may take you an hour to research. Principle number 4, build your team. We've been talking about this all through this training. No transaction is managed alone. Your success depends heavily on qualified people who you work with. Your core team should be your trusted lender, your reliable inspector, your closing attorney. How to evaluate team members. Can they communicate clearly and quickly? Can they pick up the phone? Do they solve problems or create them? Have they helped you close a difficult deal? I had a lender one time that every time something would come up, she would call me in a panic frenzy. It got on my every last nerve. I don't like that. I don't like for somebody to be freaking out to me. I already have my client who I'm having to calm. I should not have to calm a professional as well. I need a lender who's going to be proactive in seeking solutions and problem solving, not somebody who's going to freak out on me and think the deal is dead for every little thing. So I took them off my list. I'm like, that's somebody that I don't care anything to work with because I don't work that way. Now, somebody else may get along with them great, thinking, hey, I appreciate that you called me with this problem, and now we're going to jump in, and together we're going to figure out a solution. That's fine. I don't mind working with a lender to find a solution, but I don't want to be the solution for every single problem they have. I got other deals that I'm working. I'm busy. I need for them to do their job. Blah, 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 blah. Team quality directly impacts your client's experience. A slow lender, an incompetent inspector, or a disorganized closing attorney can turn into a nightmare. And your clients will blame you. You are their direct contact that's going to catch everything. All right, so looking at key timelines, days 1 through 3, we want to make sure that the title search is ordered and escrow is open. What that means is you sent that contract over to the closing attorney and you're expecting them to do their job. This is an attorney that you're already familiar with. You know how quick they're going to request the title search. You know that they're on their game for reaching out to HOAs. This is why a lot of times in a contract, you may send it over and the listing agent may say, I want to close with X attorney instead of that one, because they know that that attorney is going to be on their game. Or it could even be an attorney that their office has some kind of agreement with where they close in their office, or that they already can cut them a check. There's all kinds of different reasons. So you want to fill that out. Go back to them. Hey, why? What's your reason for wanting to use that attorney over this attorney? And if they say, well, this is my preferred attorney, I've worked with him a lot, blah, blah, blah. This is my preferred attorney. And this is who I feel like is going to protect my client the best. So this is who we want to close with. But at the end of the day, you don't want to lose the deal over which attorney is doing the transaction, because ultimately they're all working for the lender or the buyer if it's a cash deal. So, I mean, you want to press to use the lender that you're comfortable with, but you don't want to push it so far that it, prevents you from getting the contract.
So just how helpful your information is when I explain that to this buyer,
Mm-hmm.
because what you're talking about, he's, asking me questions about now today when I talk to him about the next one.
Right. Okay, days 3 through 10, we got an inspection period. We got repairs to negotiate. You want to schedule that inspection immediately. Good inspectors book fast. Aim for day 3 or 4, which is, the first or second day into your inspection period. You don't want to have your inspection the last day of your inspection time, because you're not giving yourself negotiation time. And there's going to be issues that come up. You're going to need time to work through them. And you're not going to want to be in panic mode or put the seller in panic mode because we're at the end of that contingency. We want to make sure we allow time for everything. After the report is delivered, review it carefully. Sit with your client and prioritize repair requests before submitting anything to the other side. Now, usually the inspector is going to email that report to the client. If it's an inspector that you work with regularly, they may email it to you and to the client, which is what I prefer. That way I can look through it. This is going to be online, Tim, where you can reference it back if you want to.
Okay.
You're going to want to look through it. And, your buyer may call you and be like, oh my gosh, they found so many different things. You're going to want to diffuse that. Okay, give me a few minutes. I'm going to look through it, and then I'll call you back and we'll discuss what the issues are. That gives them some time to calm down, gives you some time to know what you're talking about as you're reading the inspection report. Then you're going to want to work on your repair addendum. Negotiate and execute before the inspection contingency deadline. Never let this expire without a written agreement or a written waiver. What that written waiver means is basically you're doing an extension on that inspection time so that you guys can negotiate the repairs. Appraisals. The lender orders the appraisal, typically within the first week, but it may not be completed until day 14 or day 21, depending on the appraiser's availability. In some markets, appraisers may be backlogged and it may take longer. Ask the lender to order it as soon as possible. Now, sometimes the delay on that is going to be the buyer not paying for it. That appraiser expects to get paid whether the deal closes or not. So typically that's charged up front. Some lenders will go ahead and pay the appraiser and then get their money from the buyer to reimburse. Some's going to set up a portal where the buyer's got to go in and click a link to enter their information to pay for that appraisal. So again, it's good to use a lender you're comfortable and familiar with so that you know what their process is When along the line are they going to do that so that you can have that client prepared and ready? We're going to got the signed contract back. Our next step is this. Have that money ready. Loan underwriting and approvals. That's usually day 21 through 30. This is where the lender team reviews every document, every income source, every asset, every piece of the buyer's financial profile. Respond to the underwriter's requests immediately, and make sure your client understands that too. Because when the underwriter has requested something from the buyer, their file is basically sitting still until that underwriter gets what they've asked for. So if a buyer is not responsive, they're delaying themselves. Ask the lender questions. What's the status of the appraisal? Is there any outstanding conditions? Are we still on track? And then there's the holy grail, the clear to close. That's often referred to as the CTC. If you get an email that says, hey, we got the CTC, you know what they're talking about. It's a clear to close. This is the lender's confirmation that the loan is approved and ready to fund. This is typically done at least 3 days before closing. Now, you've had issues sometimes where you're right down to the wire. It happens. But ideally, we want to have that clear to close at least 3 days ahead. Once you have that, you're going to want to tell your client, if you're on the seller side, let's go ahead and get the utilities scheduled to go off. Let's go ahead and get your moving truck ready. You know, depending on what possession is. On the buyer side, we want to make sure you've got your homeowner's insurance set up. Our closing day is X. That's the day they need to have the policy go active. You want the utilities all turned on. You want your moving truck ready to go. Final walkthrough and clear to close. Confirm the closing date and time with the closing attorney and both clients, ideally 72 hours in advance. Confirm the wiring instructions has been sent to the buyer. Verify them by phone because wire fraud again. Schedule your final walkthrough. 24 hours ahead of closing or 48 hours ahead of closing is ideal. It says not the morning of, but I do typically do a morning of because things can happen, especially if there's a storm or if it's in a neighborhood where, you know, it might be a little sketchy. You want to make sure nobody's broke in. Make sure that the air is still working. Candy had a house. It was actually her own personal house. At closing, lightning hit the air conditioner and it became a big deal. Who's responsible for that at closing? Is it the buyer because they just bought the house? Or is it the seller because they were just, you know, they still own the house until the deal was done? You can't determine exactly at what instance that lightning hit. So they ended up working out a deal where they, you know, split that expense. You want to review the closing disclosure with your buyer ahead of closing. You don't want to be sitting at the closing table where nerves are all high and your buyer trying to figure out and understand what they're looking at. That's just a jumbled sheet of numbers at that point. So you want to take some time ahead of closing and go over the numbers so that they understand what they're looking at. Because when you're stressed out, it's hard to make sense of it. Closing day, you want to arrive early and bring copies of everything. I typically take one of our Southern Home folders in there and I print out copies of everything that has anything to do with that transaction. Copy the earnest money, their pre-approval letter, their contract, all addendas, copy the termite inspection. If they're getting a home warranty, their home warranty papers. I put a little card in there. Welcome to your new home. Really appreciate you working with me. I have a letter that I put in there. Congratulations on your new home. A few things to remember. Make sure that you have forwarded your mail. Make sure that your homeowner's insurance is in place. You know, make sure that you got all your utilities activated. You would be surprised how many people sit at the closing table and did not think to turn on utilities or to activate homeowner's insurance on cash deals. You just don't think about it. You want to be calm and positive, a positive presence in the room on closing day. This is an exciting day for your clients. You want to keep the mood happy and light. After funding, make sure your MLS is updated. Call your clients. Ask them how they got, you know, how it was moving in. Did they get everything settled? Then ask them for a referral. Tell them, hey, let people know if you were happy with my service because my business runs mostly on referrals. And I would appreciate anybody that you come in contact with. If you know of anybody looking to buy or sell, send them my way. Okay, so red flags. This is situations that require immediate escalation. As a new agent, we're almost to the end, guys. Sorry, it's going long. As a new agent, your first call should always be to your broker when you have red flags. Red flag number 1, that buyer goes silent on lender requests. When a buyer stops responding to the lender document request, the loan pipeline stops and so does the transaction. Buyers are sometimes embarrassed about their financial situation. Maybe they're overwhelmed by the document requirements, or maybe they're dealing with a personal crisis. Contact your buyer directly and find out what's going on. Sometimes they don't realize the urgency. If they avoid the lender for financial reasons, the delay may be that they're in deeper trouble. You need to know now, not on closing day. The urgency. Every day the lender doesn't receive a requested document is a day lost. If the financing contingency expires, the buyer loses their protection. So you may need to remind the buyer that. Red flag number 2, the seller is behind on mortgage payments. A seller with multiple mortgages or delinquent mortgages may be facing foreclosure, which could affect their ability to deliver clear title. Some signs. The seller may be resistant to provide payoff information, or take longer to respond to any communication, or is uncooperative in the transaction. What do? You got to work closely with the closing attorney to pull complete lien and mortgage information. If the notice of default has been filed, the seller may be in pre-foreclosure. Short sales. If the home is upside down, meaning they owe more than what the property is worth, you may be dealing with a short sale situation, which requires lender approval and a significantly longer timeline. Another red flag, active mold, structural damage, or illegal electrical. These are not just inspection items. They can be lender disqualifiers and habitability issues. Lenders, especially VA and FHA, will not approve a loan that has active mold or a significant structural issue or code violation. The property must be remedied for loan approval. The deal is not necessarily dead, but it may require a price adjustment, seller-funded remediation, or switching to a different loan type. Legal electrical or illegal electrical. Knob and tube, aluminum wiring, or unpermitted panels. Consult your broker and potentially a licensed electrician before advising your client. Red flag number 4, appraisal gap over 5%. A 1 to 2% gap is manageable and common. A 5% gap on a $400,000 home is $20,000 plus. And that's a problem that can change the financial structure of the entire deal. Options narrow significantly at this level. Buyer's cash reserves, seller flexibility, and lender programs all come into play. Escalate to your broker and discuss all options before calling your client. You want to present options, not problems, and not panic. Red flag number 5, contested judgment liens. A lien with a contested amount means 2 parties are disagreeing about how much they owe, which can prevent the payoff and close without legal resolution. These situations often require a real estate attorney and can take weeks or months to resolve. Do not necessarily kill the deal, but you need to know about it early. If discovered in the final week of a 30-day escrow, you're in serious trouble. The sooner you know about it, the better, so that you can communicate with the other parties and find a resolution. Red flag number 6, parties communicating through third parties. When a buyer starts relaying messages through their uncle or a seller through their adult child, communication becomes distorted and decision-making becomes unclear. Clarify early. For this transaction to go smoothly, all communication needs to go through me and the other agent directly. Are there other parties involved in the decision-making? If so, know this up front. If it's happening, address it with the other agent and establish a clear communication protocol in writing. I've had it happen where a buyer and a seller ended up talking amongst themselves, negotiating things outside of the agents. And me and the other agent had to go to them and say, hey, any deals that you guys are making are not enforceable. So you're doing yourselves a disservice by working things out verbally amongst yourselves. I know we want to trust each other. I know we want to put value in our handshake. But this day and time, you can't, if something goes wrong, you've got nothing. We have to have it in writing. So please always communicate through me. Let me communicate with the other agent. Let the other agent communicate with their client. Repeated closing pushes without written extensions. A verbal will close next week. Assurance without a signed extension leaves both parties legally exposed. The original closing date may still be enforceable, meaning the contract could technically be in default. Never agree to a closing delay without a signed extension addendum, period. If the other side is resistant to sign an extension, find out why immediately. There may be a bigger problem beneath the surface. So this could work in both ways. The buyer may have the lender saying, hey, we're ready early. We can close next week. You're going to want to do an amendment to the closing date and move that date up, just the same as if the lender says a week before closing, hey, we're not going to make that date because I'm still waiting for underwriting and this, and this. You need that written agreement. Regardless which way it's going, you need to do that amendment to the closing date. Red flag number 8, large unexplained deposits during underwriting. Underwriters, I'm struggling, flag large deposits because they need to verify all funds used in a transaction that they're coming from legitimate documented sources. This prevents money laundering. The Hispanic community a lot of times keeps cash on hand. It's called mattress money. They stick it under their mattress. That's where that term came from. And then when it's time to go to close, because they don't trust our banks, when it's time to go to close, then they'll put the money in the bank. Well, that's going to be a big red flag for the lender. They're going to want to document where all that money came from. So they may need a letter of explanation that says, hey, I sold a truck and that's where I got this money that I made this big deposit. Or I borrowed from my mom and here's her gift letter saying that, she's given me this money. Everything has to be documented. Same things that I just said. Undisclosed, undocumented deposits can delay or kill a loan approval. Warn your buyers at the start of escrow. If you receive any large amounts of money before closing, call me immediately before depositing it. So there you go. Don't be spending any money without letting me know ahead of time, because I'm going to tell you no. And don't make any large deposits. Two big no-nos there. Pre-closing checklist. Walk through each item on the checklist with, it's telling me to do this with you. All contingencies released in writing. Every contingency must be formally released before closing, in writing and signed by the buyer. Verbal releases don't exist. Now, on our contracts, say for instance, you have an amendment to address concerns. I've had the occasion where at closing, the lender requires an amendment that says all parties understand and agree that the repairs were made to the buyer's, satisfaction, and everybody signs it. That closed that contingency then, because all those things still needed to be done before closing, and it was just hanging out there. Some lenders require it, some don't, but it is a good practice to always have. And if you do that pre-closing inspection, at that deadline of when the things were supposed to be done, right then you can let the other party know with that amendment that everything's done to their satisfaction. We're happy. Here you go. Here's our letter that says so. They sign it. You sign it. Everybody's good. Confirm that any repair agreements are fully executed by both parties and that they agree of how the work will be done or how the credits will reflect in the closing figures. File the addendum in your transaction management system and confirm with the closing attorney that they have a copy. Lender issued clear to close. This is the green light from the lender. Without it, there's no loan, no closing. Pursue this aggressively, starting at day 21. And this is assuming you have a 30-day closing. When you receive your clear to close, celebrate internally, but keep working on your checklist. Title commitment, delivered and reviewed. The title commitment, sometimes called a title binder, is the title company's commitment to insure the property. it says review it with your client, but typically that's done between the attorney and the lender, because for the lender to have the final clear to close, they have to have clear title. So that kind of works hand in hand. Make sure any title issues are addressed before closing. Closing disclosure reviewed by the buyer 3 days prior. We have a legal requirement for that closing disclosure to be delivered 3 days. And that's called our TRID guidelines. That's federally regulated. So the buyer has to have a copy of what their numbers are going to look like 3 days ahead so that they can review it and approve it. This helps prevent any issues with errors that could cause loan delays. It makes sure the buyer knows how much cash they're going to need for closing, gives them time to get their wires in, lets them see confirm the purchase price, know what their lender fees are, make sure the credits are correct, basically making sure all the numbers are right in the transaction, and they have 3 days to look at that and review it. So with the federal government saying, I'm going to give you 3 days to review it, again, this is why it's important that you go over that with your client, because they need to understand it. The government sees that it's so confusing that they think you need 3 days for it. You certainly need to discuss it because you're seeing it for every deal. Final walkthrough scheduled and completed. Schedule your walkthrough 24 to 48 hours ahead of closing. Again, I still like to do mine the day of closing. The buyer is verifying that the property is in the same condition as when they signed the contract, and they have agreed already that all the repairs are completed and all items that are included with the sale, like the appliances and the fixtures, are present. If anything is wrong, you have time to fix it before you go to the closing table. And that's why it is important to do it 24 to 48 hours. But again, stuff does happen on closing day or the night before. And I just always like to have my buyer for sure that, on that day, they're getting it in the same condition. At or after closing, the buyer's wire instructions are confirmed. This is going to be ahead of closing for us. You're going to want to make sure that the buyer's, this is talking about if the buyer's getting anything back. So the buyer will provide wiring instructions to the closing attorney if they're getting anything back at the table. You want to make sure that their wiring instructions are correct, because once that wire goes out, it's really hard to pull it back. The seller provides keys, garage door openers, codes at closing. This seems obvious, but it's often forgotten in the excitement of closing day. Remind the seller through their agent, or you directly if you're on the selling side, for them to bring all the keys, the garage door openers, the mailbox keys, the gate codes, the alarm codes, any smart home access that needs to be transferred at the closing table. Make sure they bring it to the table and make sure it actually does get handed off to the buyer at the appropriate time. Make sure any seller credits are reflected in the closing disclosure. If the seller agreed to any credits, repair credits, closing cost credits, price adjustments, verify that these appear correct on the closing disclosure. A missed credit discovered at the table can cause delays and frustrations. Try to catch it at least 3 days before. Post-closing occupancy agreements is executed. If the seller is remaining in the property after closing, confirm the post-closing occupancy agreement is signed and dated and includes a daily rent amount, the last day of occupancy, security deposit terms, and condition requirements. MLS status changed upon confirming funding. Do not change the status in MLS to sold until the transaction has funded, meaning the wire has been received and confirmed by the closing attorney. In some markets, recording happens on the same day. In others, it takes a few days, so know your local practice. Typically, we fund same day here in Georgia. Sometimes there may be a lender delay with a wire. If you've got a late afternoon closing and the lender has closed at 5 o'clock, that wire may not go out until the following day. But typically, we do fund at the table same day. Thank you, follow-up, and referral request planned. The close of transaction is the beginning of relationships, not the end. Plan your follow-up, a handwritten thank you card, a small closing gift, a check-in call at day 30 and at 6 months. When the moment is right, ask if you know anyone thinking of buying or selling. I'd be honored to help them. This is how you build business.
Very good. How about that?
Remember that every problem is solvable. And use these 4 principles. Document everything. Calendar every deadline. Know your contract. and build your team. That's going to be what makes your real estate career successful. And remember too that your attitude is contagious. Your clients take emotional clues from you. If you panic, they panic. If you're calm, confident, and focused, so are they, and they will trust you. Right now, every scenario is hypothetical. After your first 10 transactions, you'll have lived through most of them. After 50, you'll handle them instinctively. Be patient with yourself, ask for help, and learn from every deal. Thank you guys for your time and engagement. Any questions? Nope.
The only reason why I do have a question. Our lenders that we